tonight we're going to talk about India-US bilateral relationship. We have somebody with us who has been into this helm of relationship for a long, long time. He is Mukesh Aghi, the President and CEO of India-US Strategic Partnership Forum. A forum is not for the profit, and it's committed to create a strategic partnership between the United States and India. Lately, Mukesh Aghi has been doing a lot of work, commendable work, especially in the security partnership with India, bringing key technology to India, and also in the recent Indo-US bilateral security relationship. So we'll begin the conversation. We will touch upon a lot of issues that impact India-US bilateral relationship. Security would be one of the main agenda, of course, but then we will also focus on the trade issues between the two countries, how it's going, moving ahead. Mukesh will highlight some of the policies aspect from the both sides. So let's begin. I understand two democracies are building relations stronger day by day. There's no doubt about this. We see a lot of security partnerships unfolding. But as in terms of the trade relationship, there seem to be more divergence than the convergence between India and US. As a leading forum, what are you doing to bring India-US closer in terms of policy and its implementation? If you to Mukesh Aghi.
Well, Manish, thank you for having me, and I'll give you my perspective. I think there's no other important relationship on this planet than between India and the United States. It's geopolitically very much aligned, and from a people to people, you have 4.5 million Indian Americans here, very closely aligned. From democratic value system, both countries are aligned. And when you look at it from a technology perspective, you have Silicon Valley, you have Bangalore, other areas which very much align. So I think it's a relationship which is aligned in the same direction. What we have to do is keep on working, because in democracies, you have opinions and you have multiple opinions, and you need an institution which keeps on focusing the same direction. And that's where USISPF comes in. Our objective is, regardless of which government is in power, Republican, Democrat, or in India, our objective is to enhance the relation to two countries. And that means if we have to focus geopolitically as a starting point, we're doing that. And I think with the rise of China, it puts a lot of pressure on India to align itself with other powers, other democracies, to protect its interests.
Great. So we have some of the divergence. We have the issue that we need to be discussed. Basically, that's you agree that. Before we come down to the key security aspect, I would like broadly to discuss the trade aspect. Basically between India and US, and then there's a lot of recent debate in India regarding the e-commerce rule. If you see the US American giants like Amazon, they have rather even complained to the government regarding tweaking the e-commerce rule. So how do you see such things developing in the bilateral trade, which is a very important and critical area for India? The Indian government wants to protect consumer, give more rights to the small vendors. It's an emerging market. While these giants have a better bargaining power in terms of capital infusion and, of course, technology they're bringing. How do we synergize, and what your forum is going to do about, what's your thought on this?
So I think trade is a critical aspect of US-India relationship, which is around $142 billion. It came down due to COVID, and our objective was to take it to $500 billion. The challenge is that with the COVID, India economy shrank by over 30%, and it will grow this year by around 9.5%. Economy which is almost $2.7 trillion. Now you look at United States, which is a $23 trillion economy, it will grow almost 6.5%. So, almost generating same GDP as India does on an annual basis. So there is a synergy, because the growth will have an impact on India's growth. Growth will have more FDI coming into India, which we are seeing year to year is up by 19%. And as far as policies goes, yes, you will have disagreement. And we have given feedback on e-commerce policy that you got to keep the interest of consumer in mind and don't get too much into managing the business. A broad policy framework should allow companies to compete and provide better services to individual consumer. So we have provided that feedback. I think it's important. It's not just impacting the US companies, impacting Indian companies also, the complexity of that e-commerce document. So let's see how it goes, but we have provided our feedback.
But Mr. Mukesh, further on this, this is important basically. One side, government wants investment, government wants technology through such FDI, and also the company like Amazon, which comes bring a lot of new expertise, creates job in the Indian market. So when government is coming up with draft consumer protection rule, which is under the draft now, what exactly the US companies are looking for in terms of the policies that will sort of help them invest more in India? Are they thinking India is probably more protectionist? Is it sort of because of the political compulsion back here? What's your thought of this?
So I think we are, from a US company perspective, we're looking for transparency. We're looking for level playing field and ease of doing business. And I think if we just focus on three broad spectrum, it will drive more and more investment into India, especially from the US itself. So it is important that as policy documents are framed, there is enough consultation and conversation with people who get impacted, and making sure that we are protecting the interest of the consumer, but at the same time providing level playing field to all the players.
But at the same time, when our commerce minister pointed, makes a remark about that American companies and flouting norms, basically hinting towards these e-commerce companies, rather, if I confine to his comments on, how do the US companies take that, because that's in the public domain, and what kind of rule they flout basically, or they break, especially in e-commerce. It's a new area. Of course, government also trying to formulate, understand the nitty-gritty of e-commerce. It's a complex technological sort of barriers for Indian policymaker also to understand. Where would you see the in between the convergence and what your forum is talking about and doing about this?
Well, always technology leads and policy follows. And sometimes policies can curtail the value proposition of the technology. And we don't want any policy coming in which will have a negative impact on services being offered or consumer are not getting the competition and services. You have to understand that at the end of the day, this is a market which is going to grow, both from a SME perspective and also from a large company perspective. That's where the whole retail segment is moving. And it is important to have competition. And at the same time, making sure that any policy document we put in protects the consumer. I'll give you an example. For example, there's a clause which says that for every foreign offering you have, a product offering you have online, you got to have a domestic offering. That makes it very cumbersome. If you offer a very strong perfume, now you got to find a perfume in India which is comparable. And so I think why make it that complicated? Make things easy for the consumer, for the suppliers, and let's move on.
It's a great, very interesting. You just pointed out about MSME. I understand recently your forum has tied up with Indian Chamber of Commerce, the semi part of Indian Chamber of Commerce. Basically, I think it's very interesting to understand what kind of potential it will unfold. What mechanism you're going to bring it to the full potential, as you have talked about, basically. Could you elaborate on this? What this partnership is all about?
Sure. You have to understand that over 60% of India's GDP is produced in the MSME segment. and they are also the biggest job creator. And what is needed there? You needed technology, you need capital infusion, which is cost effective, and you need global partnership. And so we are working with companies such as Bank of America to provide that access to capital. We work in companies such as MasterCard to provide payment gateways to these MSMEs. We are trying to sign up US companies to partner with these MSMEs so there's better collaboration. So I think we're looking at multiple areas to support this initiative because they are the biggest job creator. And the more you support it, the more jobs we create and better and prosperous India is going to be.
So it is about technological assimilation. It's also about the funding to Indian MSME to scale up.
That's correct. So we are working with the US banks to see how they can provide cheap capital and access to MSMEs. But that's where the biggest constraint is easy availability of capital to MSMEs.
Great. Back to the fundamental or the security aspect, I think, which is also a very your interesting part of your work, your contribution so far in the US bilateral relation. But before I go into nitty-gritty and good aspect, I would like to have this account of cuts, especially in the context of India has bought S-400 Triumph. Now, we have India-US, they both recognize the tier one partner, have commenced some of the four big sort of partnership deal, what you call from Baker to different sort of understanding, LEMOA, among others. Why we have such a misunderstanding on this? How, as a forum, you trying to mitigate such impact, and why there's a constant threat on this, despite the security partnership is going in. So we're trying to understand basically in India from your perspective.
So you have to understand, CAATSA was made into a law by keeping and putting pressure on Russia, and that means one of the biggest exporters of Russia is defense equipment, and somehow in the process, India kind of is getting caught in the fire line of CAATSA law, but there's a provision for waiver. India got waiver earlier, and now in the fall again a potential waiver is going to come. You have to understand that India is buying S-400 missiles, which are basically pointing more towards China to protect India, and which serves the interest of the United States. So I think maturity and wisdom will prevail, and hopefully we'll get a waiver for India, because the moment you start penalize India on CAATSA, just like Turkey got penalized, it will have a major impact on the relationship. And the relationship between India and US is much, much bigger than CAATSA issue itself. So I'm strongly believe that you'll see that maturity will prevail in, and you will see a waiver coming in for CAATSA.
All right. So despite that, there is a understanding in the US security establishment that India has been buying, sourcing the military hardware equipment from many countries, including Russia, and that tradition has still going on. And as you said, you think the policies will sort of turn into a sanction waiver. That's what you think, from the US government.
I strongly believe that it is in the interest of the United States to provide that waiver to India, because the relationship is so important that you don't want it getting derailed because of CAATSA.
All right. Back to the security partnership. I would like to highlight to my audience basically how it has unfolded, the India-US security partnership. Recently, we have had some great exchange of military cooperation. US has given India a high technological advanced equipment, starting from Boeing P-8I maritime surveillance aircraft, general atomic drones, to advanced combat helicopters like MH-60R, Seahawk. But having said that, it's mostly turned out to be a sort of government to government or military deals, basically. It's not about US original equipment manufactured, making in India, investing in India. What are the bottlenecks,
So I think we are seeing direct manufacturing coming into India by Boeing, by Lockheed, by Raytheon, and others. So that process continues. Most of that investment is meant for export. I may say, look at Swarovski is making his cabins in Hyderabad. You look at the wings of Boeing are being made in India itself. So that increment process will continue. I think you have to understand the whole company to government procurement process in India is very cumbersome. And it takes long time. So G2G moves much faster, much more efficient. And that's where, if you look at India procures Rafael and other stuff also. So I think if you drive the process with G2G, it still makes sense. It brings in more efficiency and takes out corruption.
But that does not still solve the problem. Of course, we're building towards capability. We're trying to have a defense ecosystem. How does USA have such a? If you have been there, you have been part of that. You've seen the research and development taking place. What is the learning? How we can build up and how we can our academia, research institution can partner, innovate, because still, what we make here is not a very high advanced component. The recent drone attacks, if you see that, we again gone out to purchase and source, anti-drone, anti-defense system from Israel and in fact from USA. Where we are lacking, how need to.
So you have to understand that India is a very innovative and creative country. And for the last 50, 60 years, defense was the domain of government and defense establishment. Private companies were not allowed to come in and drive their value proposition. So there was no investment coming in, no R&D coming in from private. And when you look at organizations which are research oriented, they have struggled trying to come up with innovative technology into the defense area. So I think you have to bring in private sector. And the best way to bring private sector into this environment would be first to start with dual use technology, which is commercial and defense, because then they can find buyers. If we just only have pure defense technology and manufacturing coming in, and if you don't have a government order, no board is going to approve that kind of investment itself. So I think it's good for US companies to come with dual use technology or bring manufacturing which is purely for export purposes only. I think as time goes by, you will see ecosystem being built up in India on the defense manufacturing, and that will make India successful in the mid to long term.
So again, you talk about interesting aspect, building ecosystem. Say, for example, the MMRC 2, which is about fighter jet program. India is talking about 114 fighter jets, which we largely would be make in India. It's a mother of our deal, which we're talking about. But then there is a condition which you ask. Investor wants an order, a deal closed, and we have, and that's a long process. So until that happens, how the ecosystem will take place? There has to have a gradual investment in India. Basically, say when Lockheed Martin proposes F-21, Boeing proposes their FEX, the new version, basically. Then what is the way out, basically? Because one day the deal is closed and they can't just start building it. Basically, it's a long process. They have to have belief, investment, and make India a hub also.
Yeah.
So if you talk specifically aerospace.
It's a catch-22. Boards are not going to approve billions of dollar investment unless they see a concrete order. And basically, you will not get a concrete order unless you have a value proposition which also shows proof that you will manufacture them in India itself. So it's a catch-22. That's why I always suggest that start with dual use technology, which is both commercial and defense, and then move all pure defense at some stage. That's the only way to go move forward. Otherwise, we will be basically spinning this cat day in, day out, and nothing's going to come out.
Could you also comment on a little of a shift in the vital aspect of the COVID vaccination in India? How does the US want to play its role, especially in helping India and India, and especially with the clause which talks about the full guarantee, and there is a debate going on there in between. And India has just so far completed just about 6 million only. How things going to progress, from the US perspective, how are they going to contribute more? As a forum, what's your opinion and how you're going to build it up?
So we have worked both with Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, to bring vaccines into India. I think the big issue is the indemnification clause, which over 70 countries have already approved it. And what these companies are saying is, give us that before we supply vaccines to India. That's one. The second aspect is under Quad. Johnson & Johnson is going to manufacture 1 billion vaccines in India for the Indo-Pacific region. And as time goes by, India is also raising its capacity on manufacturing more and more vaccines. If you look at the month of June, India crossed 100 million vaccines manufacturing. If you look at August, we're seeing over 120 million vaccine being produced in the month of August itself. And we expect by September, October, the number will be over 200 million. So I think India will get self-sufficient. It may not have the mRNA technology, but it will have an effective vaccine which it can not only inoculate its population, but also export to regional countries also.
Mr. Mukesh, besides the security and general IT trade, what are the areas basically that will unfold in future and set forth the relationship between the two countries? Is also from the Indian investor perspective, in terms of bilateral trade relation, but they can invest in the United States. Some of the potential area which they can look into in the future, which have the huge potential or reach in the US also. Could you comment on this aspect?
Yeah, I think the two broad areas I see Indian companies expanding into the US. One is on the pharma side. The cost of medicine is high. So if they partner with local companies to bring in cost-effective medicine, it helps both India and also the US government itself. I think the second aspect I see is startups. There's some good quality startups coming in India. And I think it's important we bring them to the US so their value proposition getting sold to Fortune 500 companies and beyond. And I think that's where you'll see job creation coming in. And then when they go IPO, the capital market is very strong here. They have a strong IPO also. So I see two broad aspects. One is definitely on the pharma side immediately, and then moving also in the startup scenario.
My last question to you, of course, the recent also the state visitor of Secretary Blinken, there were talks of India getting into negotiations, bilateral FTA with the United States. How it is unfolding? What are the areas which they're discussing? And do you expect this to happen this year? This breakthrough in terms of FTA treaty with US?
I don't think FTA is there in the near horizon, and the reason I say that is the U.S. Politics does not allow it. At the same time, there are vested interests in India who also don't want this to move forward. But I do see within the Quad a better collaboration and cooperation on economic agenda. For example, in the Quad, they were already agreed to work on secure supply chain. They agreed on vaccine diplomacy. They agreed on technology, emerging technology, and cybersecurity. And what we are proposing is come down on the infrastructure side also. So I think if we just start with those 4 or 5 areas, your economic agenda will move. And then as time goes by, keep on adding. Because if you're looking at FTA, you're trying to boil the ocean, which is going to be very, very difficult to execute. But if you take piecemeal aligned to security of the two countries, I think they'll move much faster.
I'll take liberty of asking one last question, if you especially with the Quad. I understand, in 2018-17, I used to write this Quad debate in India, and then nobody would answer. Basically, now it has turned out to be like in vogue. Lingo is everywhere, but that is not well defined. Of course, government has categorically denied it has nothing to do with the military sort of an alliance, but it looks like it has a strong military connotation, security connotation, and very rightly so. Why these two countries, especially India, is denying in terms of reaching out to a concrete definition of Quad in the public domain, uh, and denying that it has nothing to do with the military collaboration. Uh, how could you uncomplicate this, if I say?
Yeah, so you have to understand uh, from a India perspective, it has a 3,000-kilometer border with China, which is disputed, and you have armies eyeball to eyeball looking at it. So you don't want to provoke anything further by saying, hey, we have a military strategic alliance with the US, and they'll come to help us if Chinese invade India. You don't want to do that. At the same time, you have to understand you have Biden administration, which is aligned very closely on Quad with India. So was Trump administration. For whatever reason, the domestic politics in the US says pull out. So India does not want to be left holding the bag dealing with China alone. So I think India has to walk that fine line between China and the United States while trying to align itself geopolitically with Japan, Australia, and the US. It still has to maintain cordial relationship with China. So for whatever reason, India does not poke too hard and too fast into China.
Right. So is it because of the factor like India is very close to the earlier establishment of ASEAN, and we are not very open about embracing?
Yeah, so I think you have to understand ASEAN is not the same level of power as US is. ASEAN relationship with China is cordial, whereas between China and the US is becoming much more strained. And we expect this to continue. So I think any alignment seen by China, which is defense alignment with the US, provokes China. So you got to manage that, at the same time leverage the collaboration between the two countries.
Thank you. Here's Mukesh Aghi, the President and CEO of US-India Strategic Partnership Forum, a man who has been contributing, engaging, and raising quality debate in the sphere of India-US bilateral relation. I hope, sir, you continue doing so. Thank you so much talking with Manish Kumar Jha, Business World.
Thank you, Manish.